as we wrap it up here in the parliamentary precincts, I just wanted to get a couple of comments closing comments from my guests here in studio. I'm joined by Albert Botha, Head of Fixed Income at Ashburton, and Riefdah Ajam, the General Secretary at Fedusa. Riefdah, I wanted to ask you, just give us your closing comments around some of the discussions that we've had. We threw to my colleague Minister Botha, who was speaking to people about the budget cuts, which you've spoken about quite a lot. Your closing comments.
We are appealing for level-headedness when the Minister tables this budget this afternoon. We cannot ignore the plight of the poor. We cannot ignore the hardships any longer. One of the issues we have been amplifying calls on at this stage is that there should be tax justice. There is a disproportionate burden on the working class whilst tax evasion continues unabated. In this instance, the wealth tax must be unpacked, but from a Fedusa perspective, in particular, a tax on the super rich. There are many aspects in that regard that need to be dealt with, in particular regulation, and at the same time, as we look towards those that have been challenged by many of the aspects in South Africa, in particular the poor and the working class, we are calling for the continuation of the SRD grant to eventually be translated into a basic income grant. There are a number of areas, but for now, we remain focused on the areas that will bring about decent work and decent life for all, in the hope and the plea of a dignified South African workforce and economy that can bring lasting goodness for all of us.
Wow, it's like you rehearsed that response. Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Riefdah. Albert, I wanted to ask you to just touch on the comment that she made about a higher wealth tax. Of course, you're not a tax person, but I think just common sense logic tells you that very wealthy people, once they feel pressure in terms of tax, they have mechanisms to be able to maneuver and employ tax avoidance measures, and therefore it becomes tricky to try and tax them heavily. So I'd like your comment on that as far as possible, but also as much as we're in the realm of speculation, how you anticipate the ratings agencies to view South Africa going forward, given what you know thus far.
So I think the first step is to say that if you speak to and listen to the readings of Commissioner Kieswetter, he said that he suspects there's still a couple of hundred millions of rands that he can get out of this existing tax base of people doing tax avoidance, right? Tax avoidance is something that should be hit very, very, very hard. You can't live in the country and not contribute to it. Historically, wealth taxes has been extremely difficult to implement, and in a world where people are more and more mobile, sometimes they can backfire. The most recent example is Norway. They instituted a wealth tax. They expected they were going to raise extra $150 million a year. They ended up losing $500 million in tax revenue because people tend to have the capacity to move, right? Effectively trying to see how you balance taxes is important. From a rating agency perspective, the last rating action that we saw was an upgrade in the view on South Africa by ratings agencies, not the actual rating, but just kind of a change in trajectory. They're kind of looking at the situation and saying, if South Africa can continue the way it has, and if you think about what that means is, the South African Reserve Bank is very, very highly regarded. The South African Treasury is very highly regarded. And the only thing that they kind of need to sort out is growth. If we can sort out that third pillar, ratings agencies will start giving us the better and better news. So I think what a lot of people are looking for from this budget is to see how many measures are there that we can look at, that we can get the economy growing. How do you allocate your limited resources that we've been hearing about the whole day in such a way that it best promotes growth? Effectively saying, what's the government good at? They should put money there, and what's the private sector good at, and let the private sector contribute to those areas, and see if we can all pull together and grow the economy as fast as possible. That will help solve most of the problems.
Thank you so much to both of you. That was Albert Botha. He's the head of fixed income at Ashburton, and Riefdah Ajam, the General Secretary at Fedusa, really speaking to all the various issues that are of concern to South Africans. But I think the elephant in the room really is the issue of economic growth. We haven't been growing for over a decade, not properly. Our population growth has been higher than our economic growth, which means our GDP per capita or per head has been reducing voting. And of course, we know that there's massive income inequality in the country. So we're going to be keenly listening to the Minister around the reform agenda. How are we doing as a country in terms of structural reforms? We know that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in terms of Transnet. We have a good macroeconomic environment now where inflation is lower, and also we're seeing that interest rates have come down. But because of exogenous factors outside of South Africa, we might see that the inflation trajectory may go back up and interest rates may not get cut any further. But of course, this is a moving target. We have to wait and see. But things are looking better, but we need to see exactly how that structural reform situation is going, and is there going to be that further participation of the private sector to put their money where their mouth is and actually ensure that the reforms take effect. The economy and growth is the elephant in the room. So with that, we'll hand back to Ayanda in Auckland Park, and of course we'll have more for you. Ayanda?
Absolutely, Nompu, so much to consider. Many in the commentariat saying South Africa in February of 2025 is certainly in a better position than it was in February of 2024. But that refrain once again coming up around structural reforms, and one has to wonder whether this is the budget that will finally see through to that objective. Nompumelelo Siziba, part of our team, live to us there from our satellite studios in Cape Town as we continue with our build-up to the budget statement expected at 2 p.m. Nompu, for now, thanks very much indeed.